and so excited to share about the story for Inner Belief Network. I'm Barbara Phillips. Been working at Google for almost 7 years. My full-time role with Google is economics business partner with the economics team, and that is my full-time role. I also, as part of my role now as founder and co-chair of the Inner Belief Network at Google, or ERG. And Inner Belief Network, that's a great question. As you might have guessed, Paul, was a very intentional name. Inner belief, why not inner faith? So we get that question a lot. And inner belief, we want it to be as inclusive as possible. So sitting down with our committee and working with our diversity inclusion teams, we're extremely intentional about the name. We wanted to be inclusive to all communities at Google. If any employee wanted to join, we didn't want them to feel left out or feel like maybe if they don't have a faith, they couldn't join the group. And so we, of course, have allies, and we, of course, have a structure of various religious chapters and different faiths. But we, of course, wanted to be inclusive to maybe those who don't have a faith and want to partake and want to join the community. So, for example, we have maybe an atheist community that would want to take part, and interfaith just simply doesn't fit that community, right? They don't have a faith necessarily, but they have beliefs. So Inner Belief was the name we decided to go with for that reason, to be as inclusive as possible in our communities inside at Google.
I'm Naomi Kraus, and I've been at Google for 8.5 years now, actually. I'm a UX content strategist actually in Google's Geo. I work on Google Maps, so I help get you places, and I actually help people find businesses actually on Google Maps. So I had no intention whatsoever originally of working on an employee resource group when I walked into Google. It was very much a spur of the moment decision. Right now, I am the global chair of the Inner Belief Network, and Barbara is absolutely correct. We very deliberately went with Inner Belief Network rather than Interfaith Network. We have a lot of allies actually who actually are a part of our employee resource group. Who in fact actually don't profess a faith, but they are very respectful of the fact that we do. And they do have belief systems, however, and we definitely wanted to be respectful of them. And we wanted to make sure that they felt included. Inclusivity and respect for being inclusive is very much a part of our motto and our mission. And we wanted to give them a feeling of belonging within our group. And we wanted to make them comfortable. And that was definitely part of the reason that we went with that name.
The journey of starting an ERG in a company like Google with thousands of employees across the globe, it was definitely an accomplishment. And so I'm extremely honored and blessed to be part of that in the beginning foundations of that group. And how it started. I mean, it would take us way too long to go over all of the details, but I can give you a very general picture of the beginning of it. It started with community and the deep desire to really meet other colleagues who share that identity of faith with you, not feeling alone. And I think Google has done an excellent job at building these ERG communities, these ERG employee resource group communities, where you can be there for your colleagues, you can be there for one another, lift each other up. Unfortunately, for a long time, there was a restriction against religious and faith communities. There was actually a guideline that did not allow groups of faith to be part of the ERG community. So when I started at Google back in 2016, 2017, unfortunately, that was in place. And so it took really working together with the organic communities that were praying together or gathering for lunch together from all religious groups. Like we have the Jewish community, we have the Christians, we have the Muslims, we have the Buddhists, we have an interfaith community, and more. And so it really took the organic sort of communities that were already present to come together with this deep desire to want to be included, to have a seat at the table with our other communities in ERGs, and not only for the benefits and the pluses and the events, et cetera, but also to just be able to share our story, to have a voice, at the table of diversity and inclusion, where a lot of the programs are really based on these experiences that our employees are having. And so it was really a challenge in the beginning to sort of get the attention. But once we were able to work with diversity and inclusion, and we were able to get Monica Marquez, and you heard from Tommy and others who we were able to work with them and partner with them. Like Naomi said, this is not our full-time role. We're not in HR. We have full-time roles, but really wanting to take part and have a seat at this table, and that began a journey of exploring what that looked like. And so very briefly, in just a few minutes that I have to share how this all started, I would have to say it started with the community. It started with a deep desire to want to be included as our identity is of faith, or our individual faiths, and that comes first. And we are called to be the best employees we can be. So how does that line up with the values that we have in the community at Google? And so really working with HR and partnering with them, we were able to build a case to remove the restrictions that were in place that didn't really make sense for the company to have, and nobody had really questioned it. And so we were able to come together as a group of various religious and faith communities to remove that and redefine ERG groups for the company completely. So that was removed, and as of end of 2017, beginning of 2018, we received the green light. We'll give a shout out to Danielle Brown, who was the VP of Diversity Inclusion at the time, who really worked with legal and comms and was able to really speak for us and be that voice for us.
And at that point, that's when all of the groups got together, and we actually joined. We actually met in person for the first time. Up until that point, it was very much a grassroots experience, to be honest with you. We had basically met in shared documents and shared spreadsheets, and we were having conversations. And for the first time, the leaders of that movement, which had essentially been a grassroots movement, actually met in the same room. Barbara and I actually met for the first time during a summit, and we came together and we decided, all right, now that we've got approval, how do we make this work? And we had a whole bunch of religious groups, and we sat down and we're just like, okay, we have a bunch of faith groups now. From a pragmatic standpoint, what are we actually going to do with that? Because there were going to be potential hiccups, et cetera, and so forth. When you bring a whole bunch of groups together, you have to actually make it work. I had a minor meltdown already because I decided to make cookies for the group. We're just going to remember this. And I accidentally used vanilla, and then we started freaking out because there was alcohol in the vanilla. And I thought, oh my God, I offended the Muslims. As it turns out, they ate the cookies anyway because the alcohol burned out. But for a while there, I was panicked. But we sat down and we actually came up and we were just like, okay, what is it that we want to achieve as a group across a corporation from Google's side? What is it that we want to achieve as a group? We want to give those people of faith at Google a voice. We want to establish a gold standard for mutual respect. We want to make sure that people who are people of faith are respected at Google, that they feel included at Google. But we also want to make sure, since we are a corporation, that we want this sense of respect and community to also be extended to our users. We want to come through within our products. We are business, we're a corporation. We want to make sure that that's also there. So that was very important to us as well, because ultimately, we're still going to be a functional business and we're still going to be a corporation. We are still employees. We're not stupid. And we want to make sure from that perspective that we're keeping those things in line. But we want to make sure also that people feel free to practice their beliefs and they feel comfortable. And so we sat down and we basically tried to figure out what are the fundamental principles that we want to establish for our employee resource group. As it turns out, even though we are one of the youngest employee resource groups at Google, strangely enough, we were, I think, the first to actually establish principles, because we went to all the other employee resource groups and we're just like, okay, how do we do this? And they were just like, we don't know. And so we were the ones who actually, in some ways, were leading at the forefront. We established a whole bunch of principles, principle documents and things like that. We were very thoughtful and deliberate about how we were doing everything, because we had groups that, if you actually take a look, if you look in the media, et cetera, and so forth, that may have a reputation of not necessarily getting along. And to be honest with you, we have not had any problems. If anything, we are, I think, a model of collaboration across the company. And we wanted to make sure, for example, we consulted with outside organizations like Tannenbaum And we asked them, are like, what are the ways that we should be interacting? What are our best practices? We looked at all of that material. We wanted to make sure that we started off on the right foot and that we were successful. And actually, I think one of the highlights of our first 2.5 years of existence is the fact that we have managed to accomplish so much in 2.5 years because, for example, one of our core principles is that we focus on behaviors and not beliefs. There are going to be realities that our belief systems are not necessarily compatible with each other. That's fine, but we are respectful of each other. And we are respectful of the fact that we all have big beliefs. And I think that's the most important thing, is acknowledging the fact that I respect you and I respect your right to have that belief. And that was extraordinarily important. And it was extraordinarily important that every single group had that sense of community. That was hugely important to us, especially in the last year with COVID. I mean, because I think that was a huge blow to a lot of religious communities who all of a sudden couldn't gather in person. So like for us, especially at Google, that was like a big deal. And we wanted to make sure that everybody felt like they could feel included and that they belonged. So that was, from our perspective, something that IBN could definitely function. Sure. I can give you 2 very quick examples, specifically with regard to allyship and to workplace inclusion that actually affects the business. So on the first, on allyship, one of the major themes that we focus on specifically with IBN has to do with religious persecution, and which is unfortunately an issue across the globe. We very much have put together education and allyship trainings for fellow Googlers with regard to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, to unfortunately rising problems. So we have been actually circulating those trainings across the board throughout Google so that people are more aware of the issue. Because I think a lot of people just aren't. And yet, and a lot of fellow Googlers are actually genuinely surprised when we tell them, you know, the #1 religious hate crime actually in the United States is actually anti-Semitic crimes against Jews. If you actually look at the FBI data, they're stunned when we actually tell them that. So that's #1 on the allyship trainings. So awareness, I think, is an issue so that they are actually aware of what their colleagues are dealing with. On the workplace inclusion that actually affects the business, inclusive scheduling has been something where we have been at the forefront of dealing with. We just rolled out actually a subscribable calendar because, to be honest with you, up until the point that we were in existence, Google had actually been scheduling major business events on religious holidays. If in certain cases, they were scheduling conferences so that they were actually hurting themselves because the next cloud conference in 2020, before COVID actually canceled it, was scheduled literally on the eve of Passover. The Israeli tech sector was not going to come. That's just not good business sense. We pointed that out. These are things that we can actually prevent, because reality is there are approximately 6 billion users of faith out there. And by us actually helping them with this kind of inclusive scheduling calendar, we are actually improving the bottom line. And those are concrete business things that make our internal employees feel more included because we're not overscheduling religious holidays, but it's also helping because we're also not hurting ourselves by potentially not having a good business experience. And Barbara?
Yeah, no, that's great. I echo that. I think that I'll speak into the workplace inclusion and product inclusion examples. Billions of users affected by all of our work, and so we definitely want to be respectful of that and inclusive of that. So you're absolutely right, Naomi. I love the allyship initiatives that we have at Google. Another initiative that we have this year in 2021 is this theme of belonging. And the theme of belonging, really, one example of product inclusion would be we had a YouTube faith initiative blog. So some of you guys might have noticed on our external blog page, we were able to post a blog that would give you a little bit more information about our products and some of our offerings and how Google products can actually help communities of faith during these difficult times of COVID and during the holiday seasons. And so there were a few blogs that were posted. Those are 2 great examples of how our company and how our how IBN and the company have worked together to really make an impact for our users. And internally, we have another example would be we have a new Google orientation. So when employees first come and join the company, they can learn about ERGs and they can join a community. And so one of the things that we've done, one of the first things that we were able to do with Interbelief Network being an ERG, we were able to be present at those orientations and ensure that employees felt included and were able to join a community near them. And as you know, we have offices all over the globe. And so some offices are smaller than others in our headquarters. And so a community there could be really important, especially if it's a community of faith where there might be some persecution, like Naomi said. And so we, being present just really helps the employees there. So being part of an orientation where they know and are aware of our existence is a big part of that. And then I mentioned the YouTube blog posts that were on our external pages as well, to mention just a few of the many work projects that are going on.
Well, for me, I have to say that it's given me the opportunity to give an official voice to some people who felt voiceless. I think that that's been amazing, especially, whether it comes to scheduling issues, a religious employee who wasn't able to, let's say, take advantage of career opportunities that now can because someone's fighting and advocating for them. We have opportunities to advocate, for example, for charitable donations through google.org. We've gotten grants towards fighting religious persecution and anti-Semitism and hate and religious hate that I don't think we would have gotten before. That's very meaningful when you see members of community, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your own religious community, just the religious community at large. It just makes you feel really good knowing that you've made a difference in that way into that person's life. The other thing is, we've been able to also just increase a sense of belonging for employees. I'm an Orthodox Jew. For me, it's amazing that knowing that I've actually helped my fellow coworkers be able to go to certain Google offices now and get kosher food and be able to sit down and have lunch with another colleague. I wasn't able to do that in some cases, and now they can. And to be able to actually have it like a chit chat over lunch is a really cool experience. And especially at Google, because food is really important. So I have to tell you, like it does increase your sense of belonging as a coworker, and it does make you feel good. And it makes you feel even better knowing what your ERG may have made a fellow colleague think about making someone feel more included. And that's the best feeling of all, when you don't have to step in, when somebody else now starts thinking about it. I think that's what really makes the whole experience meaningful for me.
That's great, Naomi. I know for me, very similar. I totally agree with what you've said. And I think for me, I definitely understand that those feelings of wanting to just be there for our colleagues. And I think for me personally, my journey at Google, it started with community, like I mentioned earlier. And I think for me, becoming part of a community was super important. But then soon after, it became more than that, and realizing that some employees were feeling left out simply because of their faith. And that was not okay for me. And I think that really just learning more about some of these communities, some of the experiences that I've gone through, feeling a little bit left out, and not only in this company, but also learning about other companies where they've had, shared some of their testimonies. And so I really wanted to my personal mission on this, and my heart behind it and passion behind it was to help break a lot of the myths that are out there on people of religious communities or faith communities that unfortunately are just there, or maybe some people are just dismissive of it or just not really understanding. And I think education is really the biggest piece for me, community and education, building a strong sense of community within our or within our groups, but more than that is also breaking a lot of these myths and busting. I call it myth busting, right? Myth busting these myths of religion that are going around, or pre-assumptions that are just not really healthy for the community as a whole, and it could really just be very disengaging. And so adding conversations focused around education is really like the passion behind all of it. And I think a lot of the things really will begin to unfold and come together as we begin to have deeper conversations. It's okay to agree to disagree, but let's talk about it. Let's learn about one another. Let's learn about our neighbor, and let's love each other. And so I think that was really the passion behind all of it for me personally. And so really honored again to be part of IBN at Google.